Get that camera the away from me.
I was so appalled by the way I looked.
The people that try to make you scared, you know, and fight back.
It's been a dream to join the MCU. The movie is called The Fantastic Four. I'll confess, I did all my stretching for...
Pedro Pascal was supposed to be Marvel's golden ticket, the charming outsider who went from internet's daddy to the face of Disney's billion-dollar reboot. But when the dust settled, the Fantastic Four wasn't a triumph. It was a flop. And now, in the fallout, all eyes aren't on the critics or Disney executives. They're on Vanessa Kirby. She didn't make a statement. She didn't point fingers in interviews. She didn't need to. Because her silence, her body language, and her icy distance from Pedro during the press tour have become a message all on their own. A message that fans are interpreting as blame. And the pressure has broken him. Behind the charm, behind the jokes, Pedro has been caught in tears, overwhelmed by the whispers that his behavior didn't just make Vanessa uncomfortable, but might have played a role in destroying Marvel's most hyped film in years. From awkward hugs to political distractions, from Disney's quiet panic to fans dissecting every interview clip, the narrative has shifted overnight. Pedro isn't Marvel's savior anymore. He's the man Vanessa Kirby silently pinned the flop on. But how did it come to this? And why is Hollywood trying so hard to cover up the one thing fans already believe, that Pedro Pascal cried because deep down he knows she blames him? At first, the clips felt harmless. Pedro Pascal, the quirky charmer, embracing Vanessa Kirby during press events. But fans started noticing the cracks. His tight hugs, whispered comments, and constant physical closeness clashed with her stiff posture, tight smiles, and guarded body language. What looked like playfulness on his end looked like discomfort on hers. Then came the deeper context. Vanessa wasn't just his co-star. She was pregnant, engaged, and balancing the pressure of a Marvel role with her personal life. Yet every press tour moment seemed to put her in the spotlight for the wrong reason. Instead of hyping the film, Pedro's touchy interactions dominated fan discussions. Clips went viral on TikTok and Reddit, with users splicing together her tense reactions into a storyline of silent rejection. Fans began to say outright, "She's trying to tell us something without saying it." Suddenly, what once looked like awkward chemistry became something darker, a subtle signal that she was blaming Pedro for turning the tour, and eventually the movie, into a disaster. And as the Fantastic Four box office numbers tanked, those red carpet red flags transformed into receipts. Receipts that fans claim prove Vanessa had been warning us all along. For years, Pedro Pascal leaned into his brand as the awkward good guy. He talked about his anxiety. He played the vulnerable heartthrob. He laughed off quirks like borrowing clothes, making offbeat compliments, or being overly affectionate with co-stars. It painted him as harmless, relatable, a safe Hollywood favorite. But that mask is slipping. Fans are now replaying moments that once felt innocent and seeing them in a new light. Sarah Paulson looking visibly uncomfortable as Pedro whispered in her ear. Dakota Johnson awkwardly laughing when he joked about feet pics. Willem Dafoe's wife pulling away during an interaction that felt too familiar. And with Vanessa Kirby, the difference is stark. She isn't laughing off the behavior. She isn't playing along. She's pulling back, freezing up, looking away. And that silence, paired with her refusal to endorse him publicly, feels like a rejection of the very persona he's built. Pedro himself has reportedly broken down privately, crying over the idea that his reputation as Hollywood's golden boy is now being questioned. But Vanessa's distance is exactly what makes fans believe he knows she blames him. Because if she won't even back him up, what does that say? Here's where the story gets even more explosive. Normally, when a star sparks controversy, studios act fast. Gina Carano was dropped from The Mandalorian in a heartbeat after one social media post. Others have been sidelined for less. But Pedro protected. Insiders revealed that Disney quietly pulled a Fantastic Four featurette focused on Pedro after the awkward press clips went viral. Executives even told him to tone it down and step away from certain political topics. But despite the chaos, he kept his role. No public scolding, no career-ending decision, and fans couldn't help but compare. Why is Pedro being protected while others are punished? The answer, many believe, is that he's simply too valuable. He checks every industry box: diverse, politically vocal, emotionally vulnerable, and endlessly marketable. He's not just an actor, he's an asset. But Vanessa Kirby's silence disrupts that equation. By refusing to cover for him, she made it clear. Disney may shield him, but she won't. And to fans, that looked like blame. A subtle but powerful message that she held him responsible not just for the awkward press tour, but for the flop itself. If red carpets weren't enough, Pedro's political activism poured fuel on the fire. On social media, at festivals, and even at Marvel press events, he made headlines for his sharp takes on everything from immigration to J.K. Rowling. The statements earned him applause from some, but they also pulled focus away from Fantastic Four. Instead of the film being the story, Pedro's comments dominated the news cycle. And right beside him at every event was Vanessa Kirby, pregnant, professional, and noticeably quiet. She didn't clap along. She didn't echo his points. She didn't jump in. That silence, again, spoke louder than any words. Insiders whispered that Vanessa was frustrated, feeling that the film's rollout was overshadowed by Pedro's political grandstanding. Fans began speculating that she quietly blamed him for dragging attention away from the movie and onto himself, a move that hurt its chances at the box office. And the tears Pedro shed in private? Fans believe they weren't just from stress. They were from knowing Vanessa saw through the act and saw him as the reason their billion-dollar project collapsed. The most shocking part? The mainstream media hasn't said a word. While fans dissect clips of Vanessa pulling away or stiffening on stage, headlines spin it all as Pedro and Vanessa's sweet friendship. Entertainment magazines gloss over her body language and instead praise Pedro for being protective or playful. But TikTok tells a different story. Thousands of edits break down Vanessa's discomfort frame by frame. Her folded arms, her refusal to lean in, her forced smiles that vanish the second Pedro looks away. Reddit threads exploded with the theory that Vanessa was silently blaming Pedro for the chaos that followed, and that the press was deliberately ignoring it. This is where the gaslighting comes in. Every time fans called out Pedro's behavior, articles rebranded it as charm. Every time Vanessa's silence was questioned, the narrative shifted back to Pedro's quirky persona. But audiences weren't fooled. The more the media tried to cover it, the louder the whispers grew. Vanessa's silence wasn't compliance, it was accusation. And as Pedro broke down in tears behind the scenes, overwhelmed by online backlash, fans saw it as proof. He wasn't crying because of random hate. He was crying because he knew Vanessa had already delivered her verdict without saying a single word. For Vanessa Kirby, silence became survival. Hollywood doesn't reward women who speak out against its golden boys. She couldn't risk her role, her reputation, or her future in the industry. So she chose the only option left: distance. Every step she took away from Pedro on a red carpet, every moment her smile froze under his arm, every press junket where she stared straight ahead instead of laughing along, it all became symbolic. Fans connected the dots. Vanessa was warning the world without ever putting it into words. And the timing couldn't have been worse for Pedro. As Fantastic Four's box office numbers plummeted, Vanessa's caution looked less like discomfort and more like a deliberate statement, a way of saying, "This flop isn't on me." Pedro, already under fire, was left crying under the weight of it all. He couldn't stop the narrative. Vanessa didn't need to shout. Her refusal to endorse him, her refusal to play along became the loudest accusation of all. Pedro Pascal wasn't just Marvel's lead actor. He was a brand, built perfectly to please studios, diverse, emotional, politically vocal, marketable across every demographic. His anxiety became a shield, his awkwardness became an excuse, his activism became a distraction. Everything about him was packaged for Hollywood consumption, but brands can't survive when the illusion cracks, and Vanessa Kirby's subtle resistance cracked it wide open. Fans began to question if Pedro's golden boy persona was ever real, or if it was just a performance to protect him from accountability. The more Pedro cried, the more the tears felt less like grief and more like guilt. Guilt that the mask had slipped, guilt that Vanessa had refused to play her part in protecting his image, and guilt that when the movie failed, she was right there, silently placing the blame at his feet. For the first time in his career, Pedro's carefully manufactured persona was collapsing. And Vanessa didn't need to say a word to make it happen. Hollywood has a way of protecting its stars until it doesn't. Pedro Pascal had survived moments that would have ended anyone else's career. Awkward jokes, invasive gestures, even political rants in the middle of press tours, none of it ever stuck. He was untouchable. But Vanessa Kirby changed that. By refusing to validate him, by keeping her distance, by letting her silence hang heavy in every interview, she handed fans the missing piece. The illusion didn't fade because of tabloids or critics. It faded because the person standing closest to Pedro Pascal made it clear she no longer stood with him. And when the Fantastic Four collapsed at the box office, the narrative shifted overnight. Pedro wasn't just a flawed actor anymore, he was the man Vanessa Kirby silently blamed for Disney's biggest disaster of the year. Behind the scenes, sources say Pedro cried at the thought of losing the one thing he'd built his career on, his reputation. But no amount of tears could erase what fans had already seen. The mask was gone. Vanessa Kirby never gave an interview accusing Pedro Pascal. She never wrote a tell-all or sat down for an exposé. She didn't need to. Her silence was the story. Through every cold glance, every stiff red carpet moment, every refusal to laugh along, Vanessa made it clear she wasn't standing by him. And when Fantastic Four bombed, fans decided the truth was obvious. Pedro was the reason. His tears only made the narrative stronger. To the world, it looked like a man breaking down because he knew the blame had landed exactly where it belonged. The internet called it poetic justice, the golden boy who couldn't hold it together when his co-star quietly told the truth without speaking. Now, the Marvel empire is scrambling to salvage what's left, but the damage is done. The spell is broken, the mask is cracked. And Vanessa Kirby, without saying a single word, may have just ended the illusion of Pedro Pascal forever. Because if this is how he acts in public, and if this is how she responded in silence, fans can't help but ask, what was happening when the cameras weren't rolling?